Hey, everybody! Welcome to another edition of Open Source Thursdays. So excited you could all join us. And we have a very special guest today. This is Nahrin. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Nahrin? Absolutely. Let me. You know what, Nahrin? I'm very sorry.
We having some audio issues?
I think we were.
Oh
I'm
no.
so sorry.
No worries.
Ah,
Okay, how do you fix it?
I've now fixed it.
Okay.
People can now hear you. They could not before. Sorry.
All right.
Would
No
you
worries.
could you please introduce yourself again,
Of
Noreen?
course, of course. Hi, everyone. Hello again. My name's Nahrin Jalal. I'm a developer, educator, community builder based here in Toronto, Canada. I'm also CodeSee's newest developer advocate. So just super, super excited to be here. My first week here, and it's already been just a wonderful experience. So yeah, and also if you're from Toronto, if you've been to meetups here in Canada, I love speaking at those. I'm also director of Women Who Code Toronto. What else can I tell you about myself? I lead a software development bootcamp here in Toronto as well called U for Change. So that's actually a nonprofit where we have a STEM program specifically catered towards marginalized youth and underserved communities. So all in all, just super passionate about technical education and community building, and also what we're doing here at CodeSee. So yeah, super pleased to be here. Thanks so much, Ramon, for having me. Yeah.
Awesome. No, we're super honored to have you with us, to have you join us, and to talk a little about open source with us today. Folks, if you're joining in and wondering where the open captions have gone, we got some feedback that if you combine both the open and closed captioning, so we provide both open and closed captioning, it can get a little bit difficult to follow. So if you're joining us on Twitch, you'll see that there's a button at the bottom of the stream that says CC. You can open up or press C on your keyboard if you're on a computer. You'll get your closed captions there. So those are still provided. Yeah, and so we have been covering over the last few weeks how to get started with open source. We've covered finding an open source project. We've covered navigating different platforms for finding open source projects. We've been covering environment setup, getting an app running locally on your computer, finding an issue to work on. And last week we made our first contribution to open source. We made a quick
Exciting.
yeah, it was so much fun. We made a contribution to the project Free Code Camp. It was a team effort. It involved lots of discussions about proper wording. It was great. I learned some grammar, and it was it was a lot of fun. And the best part is one thing that we couldn't do live, but just after we finished streaming, that contribution got merged.
How wonderful. That's like the perfect outcome. So,
Yeah, and we were able to tag everybody who was involved. It was just wonderful. So that was a great victory, and like I said, like a first step into contributing to open source projects. So the question that comes from there that we've been talking about here at CodeSee is what comes next? What comes around that? So um Nahrin, I don't. We've been doing these in terms. Sorry, we've been doing these in a structure of kind of a classroom setting. So going
right.
in with some learning outcomes that we hope to get out of a conversation.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Let's do that today then. So I think
Absolutely.
one of the learning outcomes that we discussed for today were to touch on effective communication and etiquette around open source, right? And
Yep.
how community around an open source software project is integral to success. Super important. And then building on that community aspect, how to make sure your community is welcoming and inclusive. And then I guess we can jump right into the value of non-code contributions and what they are and what they look like and how to start contributing in that way as well. Is that everything?
I think so. I think that that covers everything. It sounds like a lot, and it it probably is a lot, but we're gonna just power through and see how much we get through. Um,
Yeah, I like to be ambitious with these things.
yeah. So today we're gonna be doing, as probably implied, we're gonna be doing less of the whole coding part and focus more on having a conversation about this and go with some these learning outcomes. If you're joining from the chat, please feel free to ask any questions or contribute any thoughts you might have. We'd love to share them with the rest of y'all and just yeah, have make this be an open and earnest conversation. And yeah, so let's dive right into talking about etiquette. Um, why don't we start with a definition? I love definitions. Noreen, what is etiquette to you?
Yeah, to me, I'd say it's not necessarily the principles, but like the guidelines and kind of, yeah, the guidelines that we should follow to make this a good experience for everyone involved. I think if I could put it in that way. How about for you, Ramon? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think what you said kind of really covers it very well. Going for that whole these I really like this concept of guidelines. I think, in the concept of a classroom, thinking about, you know, the expected behavior, the expected communication that is expected of a group of people or in a classroom in this context, thinking about what is a good way to behave.
Exactly. That word behavior, that's key there, I think. So, how to
Absolutely.
conduct yourself in a way that's expected, but then also inclusive and welcoming and appropriate and all of those things.
Ooh, yes. That's a big important topic for me that I that I'm gonna probably spend a lot of time hammering on today. Oh, hey, Lizard Eats Flies. Thank you for joining. Um,
Hello.
yeah. So we're gonna be yeah. So what we're talking about is proper etiquette in open source, in contributing to open source that eventually will go beyond the code. So
Mhm.
one resource that we found that I'd love to share with you today, I'm going to paste the link into the chat, is this a set of documentation on authentic participation. Um, we've seen before that when there's a high motivation to do lots of open source contribution, getting started can be a little bit tricky, and figuring out the process, that having a set of guidelines that from the beginning say this is how we expect everybody to to be here. I don't know if you saw it, but Lizard Eats Flies is very excited to have you here on stream, Noreen.
Aw, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
um, yeah. So why don't we dive in a little bit? You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna risk this, and I'm gonna share my screen, and let's open this up together. Ooh, okay. I gotta adjust my zoom window real quick so that we're vertically oriented. Sorry, this is a little bit ad hoc. Yeah. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody. There we go. Yeah, here,
Perfect.
very 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 ad hoc. Yeah, let's look at authentic participation, because I think this is really important in terms of what are these. Let me make this a bit bigger. Yeah. What are authentic ways um what are effective ways to be able to contribute to open source that is respect that fosters a good community outcome, right?
Hmm.
And they start here with some immediate principles that I would highly recommend going through these guides as well. But I really like having principles right there from the start to sort of have a baseline of what we want to have. So let's
Absolutely.
yeah. Why don't we go through each of these one by one?
Sure. So the first one is starting early. So they talk about this in a way where they say this came out of the discussions about organizations showing up with mature, fully baked contributions over which the community had no input.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
what do we mean by starting early in this
Yeah.
context? Um, I I can go ahead and try. I'd say that I think it's important to have a set of guidelines that show that from when we initially start looking at a project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we can see what is expected of us as contributors. What do you think?
I think that sounds exactly right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's look at the next one. Puts the community first. This reflected the general consensus that when an organization and the community want different things, the community needs to come first. Now, what do you think what in your opinion, Nahrin, is meant when we talk about community?
Yeah, so I guess it could be several things, right? But I think ultimately it's the people around like a certain product or project, and the people who are the users, so the adopters of it, and the people who are championing it. So I think the people who it's ultimately meant to be for.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think you nailed it there. I think community is kind of just the group of people that come together around this project, right?
Mhm.
So everybody involved with maintainership from contributorship from contributing, usage, feedback giving. All of these are a community of people that use a project. And here, what this guiding principle says is every authentic participation puts the community first, not valuing a specific, not just one entity, but the entire community around that project.
Exactly.
Let's go to the next one.
Starts with listening. So, this is more about folks showing up to projects with no historical context and telling them everything they were doing wrong. That's a big one, actually. I feel like that happens all the time, just even in regular conversations and meetings that we might have. So I think listening is always key.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. That's an excellent way to put it. I think, yeah, I think we can take that listening. I think this kind of links to that starting early in terms of authentic participation, of coming in and really seeing like seeing what the vibe is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and seeing what's worked and what hasn't, because you
Ooh,
don't really have all of that context when you're just jumping into something, right? So taking the time to actually understand, the history behind it and what's worked, what hasn't, what the community needs, putting the community first in that sense. Yeah, it all has to start with listening.
totally. So next we've got authentic participation has transparent motivations. Without a shared understanding of the motivations, it's impossible to resolve differences of opinions effectively. No hidden motives. This is a big one. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think it's super important to. I wholeheartedly agree with this. It's important to be clear about what we're doing here as a community. Having clear intent to go forward.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think this means it also touches on like where people want to take the project? Like having like a mission statement or something that's very clear cut so everyone knows what we're working towards? Or do you think this has to do like more generally? How do you see that? Like
Ooh,
transparent motivations around what?
that's that's an excellent question, because now you made me realize that this isn't just this kind of scales the whole way, I think, with a project. Every small contribution all the way to a, like you said, a general mission statement, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
that kind of goes together for the whole way, I would say. And its importance of being transparent. um I've had times in my open source work where I've felt it critical to be transparent about what we're doing and why with the entire
Mm-hmm.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think as like users or even like just other maintainers and contributors, like you want to know like you want to know that information before you actually commit to something and invest your time into it too, right? Like I think that's
Totally.
so important to know and have a good understanding of.
Totally. Ooh, these are really good. um,
Yeah, they're onto something here,
yeah,
eh?
yeah, totally. Do you want to read this next one?
Yeah, so we've got enforcing respectful behavior. So participants agree to adhere to a community established code of conduct. We love those. Organizations commit to holding their participants accountable for their behavior. This is a big one.
Yeah, yeah. We talk we so it whenever I code if in shall we define codes of conduct? We've
Let's.
Yeah, we've covered these in the past. I hope you don't mind if I give it a try.
Please do.
Um, yeah, codes of conducts are a set of rules that are defined by a community, be it at the level at any level, be it company, organization, event, meetup, uh, and open source project, with a clearly set of guidelines as to how this what behavior is expected from not just the people who attend but those who organize, with the key aspect being and not just the set of rules but the consequences for breaking them
Mm,
on a on an effective code of conduct are to be listed as well. How'd I do?
that's fantastic. Yeah, I think that covered everything. So, in your opinion,
Yeah,
what are the things that a code of conduct should always have?
yeah, a code of conduct should always have who
There like a particular code of conduct out there, floating out there, that you think does a really good job of outlining all of those things in a good way?
yeah. I mean, there's a there's a couple of things. I think there's a couple of things to say to that. I mean, of course, code of conducts need code of conducts are not just set in stone in terms of what they should be, because at least in my experience, it can depend on what the kind of what that code of conduct is being applied to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
for example, Unarine pointed me to the dev communities. Is it dev? Is it dev two or yeah?
I actually don't know. I used to say DevTO because I thought initially when I first started my entire tech journey that it was like just for Toronto, so TO. And then I
Oh,
discovered it was a global thing. So I call it Dev2 now.
yeah. I call it dev two as well, not dev two. um, so I'm not entirely sure. Well, you pointed me to their code of conduct. I'm gonna link it here in the chat. And I think it
Yeah,
covers.
fun.
Yeah, it's quite good. It covers a pledge, a set of standards, as well as enforcement, and those three parts to me are critical for having a successful one. Seeing what a set of expected behaviors is, um, saying from like you said, like a mission statement. What what is it? Oh, let me put it up here. I should give a warning that some of the language here could be what's the word?
Triggering.
Triggering. Thank you. Sorry. Yes. So because it needs to explicitly state what is not allowed. Um,
Right.
so setting a pledge, a setting a set of standards, as well as listing out enforcement, and finally attribution. So a lot of these codes of conducts kind of iterate from one another.
Mm-hmm.
One that's quite commonly used here in Europe that we use in a lot of event. Let me see if I can find it. The Berlin Code of Conduct, which is kind of used everywhere in Europe. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and open it up. I
Yeah, let's see.
and this is like from the start meant to be open source, and
One.
yeah, so this is an open source code of conduct that is applied to a whole bunch of this is mostly with events.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but not just necessary, since it's open source it can be malleable, so we can it covers expected behavior, unacceptable behavior, the consequence. Again, you can see that we've got that enforceability being a key part of
Right.
it. What to do if if you witness unacceptable behavior, scope, and of course the attribution that goes in for it, because it itself it's based on another code of conduct. These like this is the joy of open source, and I don't know where exactly, but I think they have I don't know why it's in. Sorry, I don't know what language this is, but I think that might be Polish. I could be wrong. I apologize. It also has here a list. You can, since it's open source, you can also put down which meetups or events use this.
Follow this line. Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So there's a whole bunch of events that use this. Some events that I've been to, like the European Ruby Conference 2017, the Ruby user group in Berlin. A whole bunch of these use this code of conduct. It's extremely common, and in fact, kind of a given nowadays with with events. Going further is to say, that's not to say that a code of conduct is, just something you put out there and be done with, because it is.
Yeah, they're enforced nowadays. Like there's actual teams out there who moderate, especially with online events, like, the chat rooms and behavior and things like that. And like, it's actively enforced. And I think that's so important because it goes beyond just putting out a statement. It actually, people are taking action, and that really shows that they care about this, I think.
Absolutely. As Lizard Eats Flies put very, very correctly says, a code of conduct has to be enforced or it's not real. Actions are bigger than words. And absolutely. In fact, what I've seen a lot of events and communities do is have a team outside of organizers be the code of conduct team.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like a group of folks you hire to actually do this for you. That's great.
Yeah, and that's super critical because in all possibility, it does happen that a organizer of an event could break that code of conduct, and who organizes the organizers? You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Who holds them accountable? So that's great. Having a third party come in, I think that's so smart. Absolutely. I didn't know if they're doing that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. It's something that I try to have as a must at an event that I will organize. Is to have a point of contact beyond me, because I'm human and I will commit. Like, that's not to say that I'm gonna you know what I mean. Like,
yeah. I think that's so important that you actually touched on that, because not all code of conduct violations are intentional, right? Sometimes we do things unintentionally. Sometimes we don't use the most inclusive language, or, we do something that we don't quite catch or we don't quite realize. So having someone come in and actually point that out to us just helps us become better and do better in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So let's go over to this last principle, which is to say that authentic participation ends gracefully. No sudden withdrawal of resources without notification and an exit plan. Clear documentation that would allow the community to pick up projects when a company decides to withdraw support. So what do you think we can take from this?
I think the importance of documentation is what I'm picking up from here. You already know, Ramon, I love documenting process and everything. I think it's so important, especially when you work like async. But in general, I think that's super important, that the knowledge doesn't just leave with you and people can actually carry things on and keep things going. So yeah, when a company decides to withdraw support, that's a big one, because companies' priorities can change and, budgets can change and funding and whatnot. And you want to be at least allowing folks to pick up and take things over, even if you can no longer support it, right?
Totally. And giving, I think, yeah, absolutely. One thing that I'm picking up from here is the importance of giving a heads up to your community as a project. For example, if a project, let me think of a project. I think it was moment.js that recently became, I could be wrong. Maybe it wasn't moment.js. Yes. Considering Moment in your project, there may be better modern alternatives. So I think what's going on with Moment, correct me if I'm wrong, I've got another example in mind, that kind of deprecated itself and gave the community ample heads up to say, hey, for example, sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself. This is a this is a project for JavaScript for JavaScript for manipulating things like time zones and time and dates and all that. Um,
Right.
and they gave an ample heads up. Like Lizards Eat Flies just wrote, like she was just looking at this for their project, looking to use Moment.js and
Mhm.
giving this ample heads up that says, hey, there might be better alternatives, kind of gives the community an opportunity to pick up and move somewhere else. I think it was the other one that I was thinking of was the packet manager Bower.
Oh, I
Uh,
remember using this.
I I I remember Bower from my first ever meetup in 2014. Good times. Um, and they also kind of gave the community a heads up to say, hey, Bower is being maintained. Oh, let me make it a little bit bigger. Sorry, folks. Bower is being maintained, but we recommend using Yarn and Webpack. Yeah. Licious Eats Flies writes, yeah, it was great. There was another note too that was like, hey, another project came along and does everything we're gonna do, so we're gonna deprecate, go to this project itself. It's
Mm.
really nice to see these things. And I think again, it's going back to this guiding principle, it ends gracefully.
Yes, exactly. And it does it in like a very community oriented way, you know? Like you're not just leaving people in the lurch, like you're actually sharing other resources that would be helpful. So it kind of just makes the tech community, feel better about it too.
Totally. Um, let's use that opportunity now that we've covered these to sort of move into, because we've touched upon this with these guiding principles, to talk
Mhm.
about having a welcoming, inclusive community in an open source project, what that means, and why it's important.
Yeah, I know you have a lot of opinions on why it's important. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of having in terms of having a successful open source project itself, a sort of commonly used way to measure
Mhm.
that success is by its use. Who's using it? How widely is it used within of course certain within reason, of course, because as Lizards Eat Flies, oh, she's leaving. Bye, thank you for coming, Lizards Eat Flies. um
Ah, see you later. Thanks for being here.
yeah, thank you so much. um it's also that there are a few packages that if they go away the internet would break, and this has happened on a few occasions as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's scary.
Totally.
There's
So
so many things rely on these things. But yeah, for sure. Sorry,
totally.
carry on.
No, no, sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself. um um yeah, that is kind of really important to have folks come and use your project, right? And to have that success, we need to invite people to use that. We need to motivate folks to try out that project, to find what works for them and find what doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. Just having it be approachable and having it not be intimidating for folks to start off with and to use it and adopt it and ultimately champion it. You need to have it be welcoming and inclusive and accessible, right? Those are so important, I think, to success and how many people continue to use it over time.
Exactly. Because it kind of makes that distinction that we start to thinking about, a project being a code base. Where do we go from how does the community fit in there? I'm curious, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, how does the community fit in there? Well, I mean, so how do you start building those relationships with other contributors and maintainers and things like that? Yeah, well, I think it goes so much beyond just the repository nowadays. I feel like when I first got started, the community, like all of that would happen within the repository. But now we've got so many other platforms that kind of foster those relationships and get people talking about the project and what they want to do with it. You've got like places like Discord, which I feel like very recently popped up and blew up, and now everyone's using it, and that's where all the conversations are happening.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's so exciting to see that.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that kind of what you were talking about earlier, like it kind of goes into, let's say, the one of the bigger points that I want to that I would love us to touch upon today, which is like figuring out ways to contribute to an open source project that go
Mhm.
beyond the code.
Yes.
Um, yeah, otherwise known as non-code contributions.
Non-code contributions. Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of non-technical contributions to open source. Especially coming from a background like a non-traditional background, which I feel is becoming traditional these days, where I didn't go to school for CS.
Yeah,
I went to boot camp a million years ago. Like that's such a great way to first get involved in the open source community, figure out how everything works, figure out your place in things, and kind of start building those relationships and building that community for yourself. And in general, I think they're always so important, like even when you do become comfortable with contributions, because they're the ones, like these contributions, these non-technical contributions are the ones addressing the most pressing accessibility barriers to open source projects, right? I think that's one of the key things that we can achieve with these non-technical contributions. So I remember like talking about this extensively last year during Hacktoberfest, which I always look forward to every year.
awesome.
And yeah, there's just some key ones I think
What?
that I. Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you tell us what Hacktoberfest is for those that aren't familiar?
Yes. So Hacktoberfest. How can I put this?
Oh, I'll also put it up here. Carry on, carry on.
Yeah. So Hacktoberfest. Let's see. How can we put it in a way? It basically encourages people to contribute to open source projects. Um, and that's really good that we want that to happen because it drives forward innovation. It gets folks introduced to projects that they may have not used before or known about before, and in general it just drives innovation forward. So I think it's really important to like get that going, and I think Hacktoberfest does that in a really appealing way to folks because it offers you a free t-shirt. And then what they introduced last year was also the option to plant a tree instead. So if you make 4 pull requests, then you can either grab yourself a free Hacktoberfest t-shirt, who doesn't love a tech tee, but then you can also alternatively plant a tree instead, which is I think so wonderful that they introduced that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that. The concept of planting trees. Yeah, because yeah, I've and I love this idea of encouraging folks get to get motivated um to try their hand at open source. And like we're kind of touching upon, it's not necessarily limited to code.
Mm-hmm.
What the contribution that Jess and I and the others made last week was a documentation contribution, which is totally a non-code contribution. But that also comes in the form of a pull request on GitHub, and there are ways to totally go beyond that. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think when it comes to contributing to a project, even in my opinion, one of the biggest contributions that one can do is to check out. Sorry, I I just realized on stream that I'm like messing around and selecting text as we're talking. I force a habit. Sorry, folks. Um. No. Yeah. Sorry. One of the biggest contributions that one can do is to try it out. Download clone the code, try out the project, integrate the library into your app, run the app, try building the app on your brand new MacBook that probably doesn't support the computer thing, the CPU stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And
Yeah.
yeah, and giving that feedback out is already such a monumentally important thing.
Absolutely, for sure. So, what are some of your favorite ways to make these non-code contributions? I know you did that amazing documentation your last time, but other than that, are there specific things in documentation that you like to target when you're making these non-technical contributions?
The thing that came up last week um was, and this was kind of an interesting one for me, because I the reason I spotted these places where we could make these improvements was due to the fact that I was reading out these instructions out loud, right? And was noticing that there were these minor, let's say, language hiccups or grammatical
Right.
hiccups. That when I was reading it out loud, I was kind of stumbling over my words more so than usual. And I felt like, this must be a lot more difficult on something like, say, a screen reader.
Mm-hmm.
So having that be a little bit, making that language more accessible, making it so that folks can follow along on their screen readers, essentially improving, making quality of life improvements to that documentation is a big factor for me. How about you, Nahrin?
Yeah, no, that's so important. And I'm so glad that you started off with that one for sure. I think building on that in terms of like language use and documentation, I think reducing condescending language is a big one for me.
Ooh.
It's, it's very easy, which would be, a sample of like a condescending thing to say in documentation, right? Because it's not easy for everyone, and you don't want to have that be there, and then when it doesn't work out for someone, for them to think that they don't have a good grasp of this, or they don't really belong here. It really sets off that imposter syndrome. So I think any way that you can find to improve the vocabulary to make it more inclusive and welcoming is really important. So whenever I see terms like easy or simple, it can really alienate people. So I really like to get rid of those as quickly as possible, and make contributions in that way. I think it's just so key. And like, I think there are people out there like Carol Skansky, I think, I'm not sure if I'm butchering her name, wrote a great guide on how to improve condescending
Oh,
language for
oh,
documentation.
yes, Carolyn.
Um, yeah, is that her full name? But let me send you the link if I can find it.
Inclusive. Oh, Carolyn is such a joy and such a clever person. Humanizing your documentation? Is that it?
That's probably the one. Yeah.
That's gotta be it. Oh, this is such a good blog, such a good post.
Yeah, so she does an excellent job of like just
Ha!
outlining everything. And yeah, I think it's just it's a thing that we can, especially if like English is your first language, I think you can pick up on things really quickly, and when you notice it, it just makes it a better experience for everyone, and it just makes it a more welcoming experience, I think, for everyone.
Thank you. Oh, that's completely. Sorry, I completely forgot that she'd written this excellent guide. Sorry, I just need to plug in my headphones for 1 second.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks.
For those of you watching, I'd love to hear, what are some of your favorite ways to make non-code contributions? I know we've got a lot of people working in open source here, so it'd be great to hear from you as well. But yeah, what else do you like to tackle?
Oh yeah. So condescending language. Right. You covered condescending language. Actually, one of the great contribution types that I love doing is by in a sense spreading the word. Especially in the more offline days. I spent a lot of time organizing meetups related to different open source projects. For example, here in Vienna, I'm helping run the React Vienna meetup, as well as the Ruby meetup, and even attending these events, giving talks at these events. Nowadays, what we're doing today, essentially streaming, these are all contributions to open source software.
Absolutely. And even going beyond that and creating content around it. So at these meetups, having a talk, or, creating a video or blogging about it, those are all also contributions. And we don't necessarily think about that because there's no associated PR, right? But
Exactly.
that's also a contribution to that open source project for sure.
Exactly. And I mean, yeah, it kind of, you because what you're doing, for example, if you help, for example, or if you coach at a workshop, or give a workshop, or attend a hackathon, these kinds of things, what you're essentially doing is also introducing people to these projects. I spent a lot of time going to Rails Girls workshops, which were some of my favorite times in open source, because what I was doing was, introducing underrepresented folks to Ruby on Rails, which is a web framework, and it was just so much fun. And you would introduce people, and they would, they might find things here and there where either with your guides, which are open source, of course, and
Right.
contribute by introducing folks to those guides, to those projects, is really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like not enough people recognize that as a
Totally.
contribution, but absolutely. I think I mentioned earlier my during my bootcamp experience an eon ago, the founder of Preact came and did a little demo and like talked about Preact and what was next, and that was my introduction to it. Like I don't think I would have heard about Preact like that early on if I did. And when I first started with open source and making contributions, like that's where I gravitated towards. So that's also like a contribution, right? Just going out there and showing people what other tools there are, what other languages there are, what other things they might want to explore. Definitely. So key.
Yeah, exactly. Jess here writes like she loves getting to community events to help out when it's safe to do so. And I think I think we're all in agreement here. Just being able to go to these events and talk to people, and even one thing that I forget, spending a lot of time in events like conferences and meetups and that sort of thing, is that there's a wide chunk of the community that doesn't regularly attend these kinds of events because of personal preferences or resources or even distance. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
now that everything's on, now that we live in a Zoom world, it's different. But you know what I mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to put out content, even if it's something like my first writing a blog post about your experiences making a React app. um I'm gonna cheekily plug Jess Jess's
Ew.
stream. Jesslyn Rose here. She's streaming herself doing the free code camp lessons every Thursday, and that is an incredibly valuable contribution to that project because it exposes people to that project, and then they come in and they use it, and the word spreads.
Absolutely.
One thing that I think also goes a little bit that I've noticed that I don't appreciate as much as that I didn't appreciate as much as I perhaps should is newsletters.
Mm-hmm.
What an incredibly valuable resource that is to have a place, have somebody who on a regular weekly, monthly basis will
Yeah.
gather up their preferred blog posts on a project, on a topic, and just send them out to everybody.
Super valuable. And another one that didn't really occur to me until recently was actually Twitter threads.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's so massive because I think I'll speak for myself. I spend a lot of time just scrolling through social media and like going through something like Twitter, where if you follow a lot of tech folks that tweet about this stuff, you learn so much. And like Twitter threads that kind of talk about something project wise or whatnot, like how to achieve a certain thing or how to do a certain thing with a certain project, like those are so valuable. Like it exposes you to something really quickly. And then if there's interest there, you can go ahead and continue doing research, but at least it, brings that awareness onto something. So yeah, newsletters are great. I personally really love Twitter for just, information too. And then, yeah, always hearing people speak, of course. Something that I actually recently started doing last year is making video content. So
Ooh.
tutorials and things like that with different APIs. And that is just super fun for me. So I enjoy it. But, I've gotten great feedback on that too. So I think that's another way, especially if you enjoy like the more visual ways of sharing information. Like that's another way that you could do that.
Noreen, could I impromptu put you on the spot and maybe ask, do you have like a YouTube channel that I can plug here?
Oh my goodness, it's not a personal YouTube channel. So I've only done it for professional reasons so far. But I've been like kind of trying to like push myself towards opening a new channel, like just a
Nice.
personal one, but
Yeah,
we'll see how that goes. So far it's just been for professional. So I'm like on different companies' sites and things like that.
that's
But
awesome.
yeah.
It's a lot of work. Like video editing, I picked it up recently myself, and it's a lot of work goes into it. So massive props.
Thank you. It's a lot of work. And then when people find out that you can do that, they like rope you into their own personal projects. So my mom started a cooking YouTube channel recently, and she was like, before when she started all this, she was like, "Oh no, I'll take care of it. Like your cousin knows how to edit videos. I'll just ask her." And of course, my cousin's edited like 2, and I've done like 30. And so it's just like people will rope you into things like that. But yeah, it's a great skill. It's fun. It's actually fun.
That's awesome. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, no, and these skills, like what I really hope to drive home today is the fact that, as you can see, these don't have a lot to do with actual sitting down at a computer and coding.
Mhm.
A lot of it, like a large chunk of it, is also getting out there, talking to people, like you were saying with Twitter threads. I didn't realize the value of those. Um, but yeah, like getting the word out, getting that spread out, trying out different things. Working, a big topic lately is working in public,
Mhm.
or
Learning and
learning in public. Thank you. Working in public is a book on the topic of learning in public by Nadia Egbal. Really good book, highly
great.
recommended. Um, yeah, learning in public. Yeah, try documenting the way you try things out. It's kind of like blogging, but it's a lot more. Is microblogging still a word?
Maybe. I usually use like bite-sized or digestible content, but I
Yeah,
think that's just making things more verbose than it needs to be.
very fair. Um, yeah. So these are lots of different ways. Ooh, do we want to briefly touch on uh what is it called? Funding and donations as well?
Yeah, sure. Like as it relates to open source projects.
Yeah, because there's a couple of programs out there, like is it Open Collective? Is that?
Yeah, Open Collective's fantastic.
Yeah. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about what Open Collective is?
Yeah, so if there are projects out there that you really, either enjoy using or you really support and you want to make a contribution towards that project, you can actually donate through Open Collective. So you can make it so that you have like a monthly donation going out to the project, which really helps, folks working on it. So the maintainers of it, and it just supports the project monetarily. So your contributions are great, either code or non-code. But then if you want to go a step further and actually, put your finances there and kind of make your community sustainable in that way, you can also make a donation. And Open Collective kind of showcases, it has a great list of the ones that are most funded. Is that how it works?
Let's have a look.
Let's have a look.
Seems like my internet's not cooperating today. Oh, here we go. I use Anki Droid. Anki is an app for cue cards. Cue cards? No, not cue
Oh,
cards. Sorry. Learning cards? Oh my god. Study cards. Study cards. Digital
okay.
study cards.
Very nice.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them here.
Yeah, so it's showing you like their yearly budget. So I'm guessing like that's their target. That's what they're trying to raise. Is that how that works? Maybe,
Yeah, you're
potentially.
yeah, yeah. Hey, look, there's OBS. That's what we're using to stream right now. um yeah, there's a whole bunch of projects on here that are that you may or may not recognize. For example, there's a lot of here that I didn't know about, like the North Brooklyn Mutual Aid. Um there's just a whole bunch of them here, and of course these are projects that if you perhaps don't have the time to be able to, but you do have the resource, the financial resources. This is would you ooh would this count in your opinion as an open source contribution?
Oh, that's such a good point, Ramon. I think so.
Yeah,
Why the like, yeah, definitely. I
yeah.
didn't make that connection at all. I was just thinking of things that you could do. But yeah, from the very start, if you don't want to have to do anything and you still want to make a contribution, why not have it be financial?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Great, great point.
yeah. It's kind of in the word, isn't it? Contribution.
Yeah, exactly. And generally, when a nonprofit comes to you, you do think of that. You think of donations and financial contributions. But yeah, with open source, I never quite make that connection, and it's so key. Like that's so needed. So yeah, great.
Yeah. Cool. I think we're I think we I don't know about you. Do you feel satisfied with everything we've covered, Noreen?
Yeah, let's see. In terms of non-code contributions, we covered a bunch around documentation and reducing condescending language. I'd say, I know we touched on video skills and the fact that you could leverage your skills to make contributions, right?
Yeah.
Either content or whatnot. I feel like there's another skill or maybe an ability that we don't necessarily talk about as much, which is language, right? Human languages.
Ooh.
So if you speak multiple languages, you could definitely contribute by offering to do a translation of something, right? Doing a translation of your favorite documentation. Um,
Absolutely. What a
so
what an excellent
yeah,
point.
so I think that is something that I always like to target as well. I speak a few languages just because my parents are from Bangladesh and we've lived in a bunch of countries. So I've made a few contributions here and there on that.
Awesome.
Yeah, but there's so many like open source projects out there, and most of them contain little to like no non-English documentation. So I think that's just a way to make things more inclusive. And I know there's a practical template for like multilingual documentation out there.
Oh yeah? Do you know what it's called by any
I think it's
chance?
called the First Contributions Project on GitHub, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's called the First Contributions project on GitHub, and it helps beginners to contribute to open source projects. And they've got like a ton of languages listed there.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Whoa, look at all that. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And it's just so helpful, as I said, like it just makes things more welcoming and inclusive, and that's what we're trying to do with building a community, right?
Totally. I'm sorry. I'm mesmerized. Like they have everything.
All the plans.
They have
So
Catalan. Wow.
a friend of mine, Luke Olive, I think contributed pirate English to this. I think
No
I
way.
remember him
There it
mentioning
is.
that at one point.
Oh, no way. Oh, this is
Have
so
fun with
cool.
it. And then I guess the last one I would want to talk about with non-code contributions is just tackling questions. So like once you're a part of the
Ooh.
community and you've got that historical context and you know what's happening and to like help make things more transparent for folks, you can help maintainers tackle like the growing list of questions that always exist for every repository, I feel. Questions I feel like are repeated often, and you can maybe think about answering those questions as a way to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like kind of, yeah, and ooh, what a great point. Because yeah, it's once once those issues that trip people up kind of become familiar to you, you can help get people unstuck, can't you?
Exactly. Like maybe start up an FAQ section or even just go ahead and start responding to comments. Like I think there's multiple ways to go about it. But again, that's another way that you can help and contribute. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
totally. Oh, that's wonderful. Now having conversations like this always warms my heart, and it kind of reinvigorates me to explore other ways to be able to contribute. Thank you very much, Noreen. That was
of course. Yeah, thank
wonderful.
you.
Yeah,
This has been so great. This has been so enlightening. I feel really like pumped to go ahead and start making some contributions now, I think.
I'm
I
really
had a
glad.
sleepy morning, but I'm excited now.
No, this is very much appreciated. I had a great time. So we will call that the end of our open source Thursdays. We will be back next week to look. We've got a very special.
Yeah,
Do we call them episode? I just wouldn't like me to use this words, but we've been using webisodes.
okay. That's new.
I think
I like it.
I think it's a little old school. Um, yeah, and we'll be having on the very kind folks from Distribute Aid, and we're going to be looking at looking at open source from the perspective of a maintainer, and maybe depending on how it goes, even do contributions itself. Just right, webisodes is great. Whew. um, yeah. Maybe even do a contribution of our own. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we hope to see you there, folks. Thanks a lot.
That sounds like so much fun. Definitely tune into that. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in and chatting with us throughout. Hope you're able to leave with some valuable takeaways. And thanks so much, Ramon, for having me.
Thank you, Nahrin. Looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely.
Take care,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye bye.